Facebook and YouTube. Good? Okay, I got the thumbs up. Now we are live on all social media platforms, on Instagram, on YouTube, on, what am I missing? Facebook, okay? So welcome, welcome, welcome. I kind of want to get into our topic here tonight because I have tons to say and I want to try to do it in such a concise, straight to the point. We're not going to beat around the bush tonight because I want to give you the how to get unstuck. And so that's the question we're asking. Hey, how are you? Welcome those who are joining in. Hi. Listen, take this opportunity to send to your family and to your friends so that we can get a community going here because I would love to hear your questions. So if you have questions, start thinking about the things that you would like to ask because the question I asked you earlier today is, are you feeling stuck? Are you feeling stuck? A lot of my clients come to me saying, man, I am feeling stuck. Well, tonight we're going to see how to get unstuck. So I'm going to do two things for you tonight. Number one, I want you to discover what is keeping you stuck, what is holding you back. And then number two, we need to figure out how we are going to overcome, how we are going to gain victory over the thing that is keeping us stuck. Because here's the reality. The reality is that you and I have limiting beliefs. Now, these limiting beliefs could have been acquired as early as childhood, and they need to desperately be broken. Why? Well, because limiting beliefs are costing you so much more than you think. It's costing you a ton. And so here's some of the examples I came, but tonight I'm going to give you tons of examples. I want to make it practical so that you can apply it. Because again, as the Bible says, we don't want to just be hearers of these things, but we want to be doers. And so as you apply, you're going to start seeing changes in your life, okay? So, and some of the ways that these limiting beliefs are holding you back is that it allows you to miss opportunities, be in a broken relationship, stuck in jobs that you hate, and honestly, you are unable to make good decisions. Welcome, those who are joining us. It's good to have you here tonight. We are going to see the things that are keeping us stuck and how to get unstuck. If you saw the photo there, that was the Jeep that we had before River and Reed sort of ruined all our fun and made us get a bigger car, but we had such a good time with that Jeep, and Renee would often get it stuck in that same way. Okay, and so if you missed last week's live, we talked a little bit about this triangle of death and triangle of life. Okay, and the problem with these limiting beliefs is because it ruins the triangle of life. What is this triangle of life? Well, the triangle of life is when you have quality relationships, when you have health in all areas, physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional, and when you are living for something bigger than yourself. You have a calling, you have a purpose, you have a vocation, not just a job. And when these things come together and when you have balance in these three areas of your life, well, that is success, okay? Now, I want to share with you an allegory that I was reading about this morning. And it said that there was this baby elephant. And this baby elephant, that he was tied by a rope to a fence post. Well, this baby elephant tried with all his might to just pull and tug and pull and tug because he wanted to break the fence or at least break the rope. However, he was unable to do so, and eventually he just gave up. He made peace with his condition. The elephant, the baby elephant, was stuck. However, as you know, when time goes by, you and I grow, and this elephant grew. Now he had these big old elephant legs, and he had huge tusks, and he had a huge trunk. This elephant could easily walk away from this fence. With just one step, he could have broken the fence. He could have ripped that string in two. However, believing that the fence was somehow unmovable, believing that he was stuck, the big elephant remained tied to the fence. The elephant was stuck. Do you get the point? When he was little, yeah, he couldn't. He was stuck. There was nothing that he could do. But as he grew up, that's what it means to be an adult. Being an adult means that we are going to have to unlearn a lot of things that we were taught. And sometimes we were taught these things with all the well intentions in the world. But there are things that we need to change because there are things from childhood that is keeping us stuck. And so tonight, how do we get unstuck? Okay? So now look, I love this Bible verse in Isaiah 43. If you have your Bible, you can turn with me there. Isaiah 43, and I like this version of Isaiah 43. Verses 18 and 19, it says this: "Do not cling to events of the past or dwell on what happened long ago. Watch for the new thing I am going to do. It is happening already. You can see it now. I will make a road through the wilderness and give you streams of water there. That is the promise here tonight. We need to figure out what is holding you back, and two, how you can overcome it. Don't be like the elephant. If you were the baby elephant stuck to the fence, by the rope, okay, fine, you couldn't move, you couldn't get out of it. But now you are the big elephant. You got big legs, a big tusk, huge, what's it called? The elephant's what? Huge trunk. Thanks, Renee. Huge trunk. You are more than capable of removing yourself from the fence. So buckle up. Here we go. Before we start here, if you are just joining us now, welcome. Take this time to share it with your family and with your friends. I am certain that you know someone who could use tonight's message, and I think it would be helpful. Let's start to bring more people into this community, because here we're trying to do one thing. We're trying to cultivate your character. Well, why? Why are we trying to cultivate your character? Well, it's simple, because character determines destiny. And so as we cultivate, as we make choices, well, those choices is going to result in a destiny today, tomorrow, next week, next month, that you're going to be satisfied with, where you're going to have and experience a triangle of life, where you're going to have balance and quality relationships and health, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and yes, your vocation, your calling, your purpose. Okay? So buckle up. Here we go. I'm going to give you an example of childhood laws. There are things that you were taught when you were little, and these childhood laws, well, they have become at times limiting beliefs. Now again, this is not a, 1 hour to bash our parents, on a live with Amanda. No. There are things that your parents have taught you because in that moment it served them, but now that you're older, maybe you no longer need that. So I'm going to give you an example. One of the childhood laws that I grew up with, and my mom is watching, so we'll see what she thinks about that. One of the childhood laws that I grew up in was this: you can't trust people, especially when money is involved. That's a childhood law that I was taught, okay? But now let me preface by saying this. I understand why I was taught this childhood law, and here's why. Well, when my mother was a little girl, and she had several brothers and sisters growing up, her father was a very poor man, and so was her mother. But because they were such hard-working people, well, they started to do really well for themselves. And my grandfather and my grandmother, they would plant fruits and vegetables, and it got so big, they started to prosper so much that they were selling it. Here, let me try to, this was Brazil, okay? So they were selling it, imagine, to Costco, okay? So they were doing really well for themselves. Now what happens is, my grandfather, he's just a humble man. He's just a humble man who worked really hard, who started to make really great money for him and his family and brought security and stability for his family. But unfortunately, those who call themselves his friends abused that position of friendship. And, the story goes that my grandfather was actually murdered by these people that he trusted due to money, and then they took his money. My mother and her siblings, and my grandmother was left without their main breadwinner, their fathers, their husband, etc. So do you understand why this law that was passed down to me and my brother, it made sense, right? In that situation, in that circumstance, I'm even going to go far as to say this. I'm happy that my mother applied this law to herself, and here's why. Because it protected her. It protected her from being overly naive, from trusting people, and who knows what could have resulted back then. And so this law that not only my mother, maybe a lot of the siblings acquired, was because in that situation, in that circumstance, when they lost their father, it made sense. Do you understand what I'm saying? It made sense. Now, here's what happens. My brother and I, although we're taught this law, understandably so, a mother who is trying to protect her children, right? Be careful with people. Not everyone is trustworthy. And that's true. We can't say no one is trustworthy, but we can definitely say there are some people who are not trustworthy. And we can definitely say when money is involved, unfortunately, people show their true colors. That is true. And so growing up, we have to realize, we have to discover, we have to see if these laws, if they should continue to apply in our lives. And here's what I say. If it has to do with principle, we don't compromise. If it has to do with preferences or situations or circumstance, we need to start being flexible. So let me give you an example of something that happened a couple of months ago. A couple of months ago, I was going to do business, okay? We'll call it business, and I'm not going to overly share the details here because I want you guys to get the point. But a couple of months ago, I was going to do business with a company. And while I started to do business with a company, I was going to be working with this company's clients. Quickly and very soon, a situation happened where I was thrown under the bus. Okay, look at what happens. And so this is what your brain does. My brain was taught that people shouldn't be trusted, that we need to be careful, and especially when money is involved. So here I am. I'm about to do business with this big company. I'm about to work with several of their clients. And all of a sudden, I am thrown under the bus. So here's the thing, man. You can't trust people, especially when it comes with money. So it's almost like this childhood law is real. It's being validated. There's evidence for me to believe this law. Now, this is what your brain does. Your brain does something, it's called confirmation bias. What's a confirmation bias? Now, it works positively or negatively, okay? Confirmation bias is this. Your brain is wired to look for evidence supporting what you already believe. Let me say that again. Your brain is wired through confirmation bias to look for evidence that supports what you already believe. There's a pastor that I really love, and he says, you know why people follow your Instagram? It's because you are a representation of them. People follow you because in looking at your Instagram account, they see a version of themselves. Why? Confirmation bias. People want evidence to support what they already believe in. Does that make sense? And so, again, now look at this, I had evidence supporting what my mom told me and my brother growing up. And I thought, man, she was right. However, my brain started to do something else. Again, this is what we're trying to do. Why are you stuck? Why are you paralyzed? Why are you not moving forward? Well, tonight we're going to get unstuck. And so I'm going to walk you through what I did. And so in that situation, immediately, when I found out that I was thrown under the bus, I thought, what evidence do I have to support my childhood law that people are not to be trusted, especially when it's involved money? And I made a list. I said, is there any evidence to suggest that this isn't true? And so what I did was I got on the phone with, the company, the main person that I was doing business with, and I said, can we have a conversation? And I began to explain certain things. Okay, I'm not going to get into all these crazy details, but I began to explain my confusion as to why I was thrown under the bus. And here's the amazing thing that happened. The more and more I sort of explained and expressed myself, I wasn't being aggressive. I was careful with my tone. I always say what you say is important, but how you say it is even more important. I began the conversation, and he had walls so high, he was ready to attack. And I said, hey, you don't have to defend yourself against me because I'm on your team. I just want to have a conversation so I can figure out what's going on. And so we were having this conversation, and we were talking. And a couple of minutes into the conversation, he's completely disarmed, and now he's apologizing. And I realized something. I realized that, number one, sometimes people will unintentionally hurt you, maybe even unintentionally throw you under the bus because of their own childhood laws. Forgive them. This man had a childhood law that, the same thing, that when it involves money and when it involves people, you cannot trust. And so imagine the matchup. I have this childhood law. This man has this childhood law. I believe he's throwing me under the bus. He believes I'm throwing him under the bus. And what typically happens is both of these people walk away. They never talk to each other. End of relationship. Are you feeling stuck? Well, one of the limiting beliefs that you have is ruining your relationship. But I said, no. I want to figure this out. I want to talk about this. And so the first lesson I learned was that sometimes people will unintentionally hurt you or throw you under the bus, and it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with childhood laws that are limiting them and that are narrowing their vision where they're not able to see the clear picture. Number two, there is power in giving people the benefit of the doubt. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Trust that there are actually good people out there who want to do good things. I mean, are they perfect? Of course not. But trust in the decency of humankind, because then you know what your brain is going to do? It's going to confirm that bias. If I walk around saying there's good people, that people are to be trusted, my brain is going to try to find evidence to support that belief. Never assume. And finally, number 3, instead of ruining relationships, conflict can actually bring people closer together. So look at this. I had a belief, and I had a lot of evidence to support this belief from my childhood law, my limiting beliefs, but I also try to find evidence to go against that childhood law, against that limiting belief. And the result of that was that this relationship that I now have with this person, with this business, is better now than ever before. So now look, I want to show you where these childhood laws can show up and they can be present. And if you can think of a childhood law that you grew up in, please put it here, put it on our chat. What are things that you grew up in? What are some of these limiting beliefs that you have? I wrote a couple here. I had a client who told me this: Amanda, art won't make you any money. This is what my parents would tell me. Art will make you no money. Pick a more stable job so he was never able to chase his dreams. That's a limiting belief, a childhood law that he said, art, creativity, what? Artists, right? Those who draw, those who create music, whatever, those who write books, they're not going to make any money. So please pick a more stable job, or you're going to be left asking and starving, pleading for food. And because of it, he never chased his dream. Here's another childhood law, limiting belief. No one is really living out or experiencing happy marriages. If they are experiencing happy marriages, it's very short-lived. It's very short-term. And what happens then there are people who are pretending to be happily married, but they're not actually happily married. And so if you believe this, if this is a childhood law that you grew up believing, well, you're going to say, well, there's no point in trying to work on my relationship. There's no point in trying to fix my relationship because everyone is living in miserable marriages. Do you get what I'm saying? What are some, write it down here if you are so courageous to do so. What are some of your childhood laws, things that your parents passed on to you? Again, because in that moment it might have served you. Like I gave the example of my mother. I understand why my mother would pass me this law, would pass me this belief, because that's the thing that protected her. However, no longer does this law apply or need to apply in my mom's life. No longer does it apply to my life. I could choose to adopt a different law. So I am not limited by this belief. Here's another one. Money is so hard to make, which is why those who have it have attained it dishonestly. Is that a law that you grew up in? What are your ideas? What are your beliefs around money? And finally, here's another one. I recently heard this from a client. I was actually speaking to him this morning, and he said this: isn't it amazing, Amanda? He goes, I grew up with my mother telling me something. It's telling me this. Anytime I would go out with my friends, whether it was to a party or out, whatever, on a date, anytime I went out, before I left the house, she'd say, really? You're going to leave me here? You're going to leave your brother and your father and me? And you're going to go out and have a good time and you're just going to leave us? And he said every time he would leave, he'd feel so awful. He'd feel so horrible because the idea is you can't possibly be having a good time if we're not there. And so he grew up with this childhood law, with this limiting belief. And so he said recently, I went to New York with my wife and my friends, and when we were there, my wife was trying to take pictures of me. You know, our friends were trying to take pictures together, and I didn't want to take photos. And he thought, well, why am I not wanting to take photos with my wife and with my friends when I'm here in New York? And then it dawned on him. That's what we talked about. Amanda's talked about childhood laws, these limiting beliefs that we carry together. And so because of these laws, I'm not able to take pictures because in my mind I'm thinking, really? You're going to post a picture having a good time in New York City and your family, your mom and your dad and your brother are back home and they're not there with you? How dare you? Do you see the consequences of believing, hanging on to childhood laws which result in limiting beliefs that could be keeping you stuck? Oh, there you go. That's a good one. Absolutely, right? No one is your friend. Only God is your friend. People should not be trusted. You need to be very careful. And again, right, Scarlett, there might be a reason why your parents had to adopt this. I don't know the circumstance of your family. I know the circumstances of mine, and I know why this law was passed down to me. But part of being an adult, part of growing up is to say, hey, this served me back then, but this no longer serves me now. We don't get to bash our parents. We don't get to criticize our parents. They did the best that they could. Now we need to do the best that we can. And the best that we can is going to look different than the best that they can. I'm going to give you another example. Okay? Welcome, welcome those who are joining in. We are talking about reasons that we could be stuck, and tonight I want to get you unstuck. So number one, I want you to discover what and why you are stuck. And number two, I want to give you tools to overcome your stuckness. Okay, that's a word that I made up. So here's the second one. I was speaking to another client, and he was having such a hard time connecting with his stepdaughter. He goes, Amanda, I mean, my God, this woman is miserable. This girl is miserable. She's so difficult. The girl is 10, 11 years old. She's so incredibly difficult. She's always fighting me. She's so defensive. It's so hard to connect. And he was getting irritated at this point. He's like, nothing I do is good enough. She always wants her mom. When I offer, let me get water. See, when I offer to help her with homework, she's like, no, thank you, I don't need your help. When I offer to cook her dinner, she doesn't want it. When I offer to go, she is so resistant to me, and I don't know what to do anymore. It's really frustrating. I'm getting really annoyed, and I'm getting really angry. That's what he told me. And so we started to talk about this, childhood loss. And I said, well, and I know the background, right? I know where the little girl came from. And I said, let me explain to you something. What childhood law do you think your stepdaughter has? And he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he says, well, the childhood law that I believe she has is that men are incompetent. And I said, okay, well, tell me more. Why are men incompetent? Why does she have this belief? He goes, well, her father wanted nothing to do with her. Her father was, emotionally abusive to her mother. Her father was constantly cheating on her mother. He was never present. And he started to list all of these things, all of these evidence that this little girl would have to believe. Men are incompetent. Men are not to be trusted, right? And of course, these beliefs made sense. Why? Because she experienced that. And then confirmation bias does what? Every single time that the men are incompetent, men are not to be trusted, and her father would give her evidence to suggest just that. And now, even though she's away from her father in a new family with a new man who is neither incompetent nor untrustworthy, she's having a hard time. Why? Because she has all of these evidence to suggest that men are incompetent and that men are untrustworthy. Does that make sense? And so what happens? And so he said, oh my goodness, all of a sudden it clicked. He goes, so I need to now give her evidence that men are trustworthy, that men are competent. Well, how do I do that? Well, character, don't forget this. Character breeds trust, and competence breeds respect. Character breeds trust, and competence breeds respect. And I said, listen, you have to be very careful. You have to be very cautious. You have to understand that your stepdaughter has a childhood law that is a limiting belief that is inhibiting her from forming a relationship with you. But God has put you in a position to break these chains, to break these laws, to show her, no. Some men are incompetent. Some men are untrustworthy. But not all men are untrustworthy. Not all men are incompetent. And so you have the privilege. You have this position where you're going to be able to help your stepdaughter break these beliefs that are no longer going to fit her. Back then it fitted her. Back then it kept her safe from her father when he made all these empty promises. That's why she believed in it. But no longer does she need to hold on to this belief, because now there's a new man in town, and this man is both competent and trustworthy. Is that making sense? And so I'm going to break it down into three things. We have limiting beliefs that fall into three categories. And Mark Manson, he wrote an incredible article specifically talking about these limiting beliefs. And I'll attach the link there, and you can take a look and read it in its entirety. I'm going to quickly scan it. But we have, and I'm gonna read it exactly as he wrote it on his site there, three ways that these limiting beliefs are expressed. Number one, limiting beliefs about yourself that make you feel like you can't do something because something is inherently wrong with you. So number one, a limiting belief about yourself. Number two, limiting belief about the world that makes you feel like you can't do something. So here we go. Limiting belief about yourself, limiting belief about the world, and number 3, limiting beliefs about life that make you feel like you can't do something because it's too difficult. So about yourself, about the world, and about life that makes it difficult for you to move. And this could be why you're stuck. So I'm going to give you a few examples in each category, okay? So if you have a paper, if you have a pen, this is the time to write these things down. We are trying to get ourselves unstuck. You might be feeling paralyzed. You might be feeling stuck. Number 1, we're starting to discover, why am I feeling stuck? It could be that you have childhood beliefs that have become limiting beliefs that are not allowing you to form relationships, that are not allowing you to make decisions, that are not allowing you to quit that job. Why? Because, well, if I quit this corporate job, what is mom and dad going to think? And I can't possibly be an artist because artist makes no money. What are your limiting beliefs that you need to challenge, discover tonight, challenge, and then overcome? Okay? There you go. There you go. We're connecting here on our community. That's right. You know, no one can be your friend but God. No, you know, Pedro is saying here, I can be your friend. Very good, very good. So here we go. Limiting beliefs that we feel about ourselves, okay? So number 1, age. Age is a limiting belief that we have. I'm too old to go back to school. I've heard that so many times, right? I'm too old to go back to school, or I'm too old to start working out. My body is never going to look like XYZ. A limiting belief about personal traits. I'm ugly and no one will ever want to date me. Or maybe the limiting belief that you have about yourself is about your feelings. I can't meet new people because I'm so anxious and I'm so depressed that no one will like me. No one will want to be my friend. Now here's the problem about these limiting beliefs. This is the paradox. The paradox is this, that what we need to do to deal with these emotions is the very thing that we're avoiding. I'm going to say that again. The thing that we need to do to deal with these emotions about the limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves are the very things that we're avoiding. For example, if you're depressed and sad and feeling anxious, getting out, socializing, being part of a community, these are the things that are going to destroy the depression. Because depression and loneliness, well, they're feels, right? It's like water, it's like fire and gasoline. So not doing these things, if you're saying, well, I can't meet new people, I'm too depressed, I'm too anxious, no one's going to like me. If you have a limiting belief about yourself with these feelings, well, not doing anything about it leads to a vicious cycle that keeps going and going and going, and you start with the confirmation bias that you're going to give more and more evidence. See, no one wants to hang out with me, I'm so depressed, I'm so anxious. And you're not going to be doing anything about it. And so your current feelings will always remain, will always persist. All right, limiting beliefs about the world. There are limiting beliefs about the world, and we can see it in 2 categories. Number 1, disapproval. I can't quit my high-paying job. My parents will disapprove. Oftentimes, the reason we don't do the things that we don't do is because we feel that the world will somehow disapprove of us. Remember, when it comes to principle, we should never compromise. But when it comes to preferences, we must be willing to compromise. Another limiting belief about the world is prejudice. Now, discrimination and prejudice very much exist in the world that we live in. There are people who are racist, there are people who are sexist, and there are people who have all sorts of different phobias. And while it's important to know and understand that this is the reality that we live in, unfortunately, in this world that we live in, we also have to be very careful that these things aren't preventing us to live our best lives. And so a prejudice limiting belief could be like, I'm a woman in a male-dominated career, and so I'm just going to keep quiet. I'm not going to give my input. I'm not going to give my insight because they won't listen to me anyways. Will you be the woman that decides that I'm going to speak my mind and I'm going to do it in love and I'm going to watch my tone and I'm going to say it in a nice and kind way so that these men are receptive to me? Again, when we start generalizing things, no one is going to like me. No one is going to listen to me because I'm a woman. Every man in my job is disrespect. That's not necessarily the case. So make sure, where do you feel like you are falling a victim of limiting beliefs about yourself, or maybe is it limiting beliefs about the world? And finally, limiting beliefs about life that make you feel like you can't do something because it's too difficult. And usually, people come in 3 sort of categories. This idea of, I missed it, it's too late. Someone's already done it, someone's already tried it, said it, it's been there, I can't. This belief that prevents me from even starting because someone has already done it. That's a limiting belief. Well, I can't possibly write another book about habits. Well, I can't possibly play the instrument at my church. Look, at the band is already full. There's already 3 people playing the guitar. What are the limiting beliefs that you have? Another limiting beliefs about life, that it's just too difficult, it's just too hard, it's time. When someone says, I don't have time, what they're saying is, I don't care enough about this. You and I have the same amount of time, and there are things that are simply a priority, and there are things that are not. So when we blame or excuse this limiting belief that we have, well, I just don't have time. No. It's better for you to tell yourself, it's just not my priority. Because a limiting belief about time prevents you from accomplishing the things, prevents you and keeps you stuck. And finally, the third one in this category is it doesn't exist. So I'm not even going to try. Remember the example that I gave you about marriage? Well, limiting beliefs about life is this idea of this thing doesn't exist. So people say, well, a happy marriage, a good marriage, it doesn't exist. And so if it's rare, if it's impossible, if it's like finding, a colored unicorn, I'm not even going to try to make mine better because it does not exist. And if you were with us last week, you saw that here, right? As we're developing our character, we're trying to do this. We're trying to get you away from the triangle of death. What is the triangle of death? Limiting beliefs will cause you to experience the triangle of death, which is stress, fear, and anxiety. That's the triangle of death. The reason you are stuck is because there are childhood laws that have become limiting beliefs in your life that show its face in either these 3 ways. Limiting belief about yourself, limiting belief about the world, or limiting belief about life that things are just too difficult. Which category did you identify with? Which childhood laws have resulted in limiting beliefs that are making you stuck? And if you are feeling stuck, you very well might be living under the triangle of death: stress, fear, and anxiety. So how do we resolve this? How do we solve this? Okay, Amanda, I get it. I understand what you're saying, so now how do I solve this? So I'm going to explain it to you. I'm going to give you 2 examples, and then we're going to land this plane. Remember, tonight I wanted to be very practical. And so if you're just joining us now, I urge you, as soon as I'm done here, to go back and to watch it from the beginning so that you get real, applicable ways to get yourself unstuck, okay? So number 1, I want you to think about this. What are your childhood laws and what are your limiting beliefs? When I was speaking about mine, when I was sharing examples about my clients, did you identify with something? I know Scarlett here said, well, Amanda, one of my limiting beliefs was also that people are untrustworthy, or that money is evil, right? Or that there is no such thing as a happy marriage. Or if you're an artist, you're never going to be successful. You're never going to make money with that. What are some of the limiting beliefs that have been passed down to you? What are these childhood laws? Now, you might be thinking, well, I don't know. When you were talking about it, I couldn't think of something. Sometimes my client, recently when I've been talking to my clients about this, some of them have said, I have no idea. Well, don't worry. If you can't think of a childhood law or a limiting belief that you grew up believing, well, think about things that are triggering to you. Think about a time where something happened, okay? Think about a time where something happened that you had an overreaction to it. Remember the example that I gave you about the little girl who was having a difficult time connecting with her stepfather? Every time he would try to, in love, reprimand her or discipline her, she would get angry, she would curse, she would yell. Why? Because her limiting belief is that males are untrustworthy and males are incompetent. And so when her stepfather, which is neither incompetent or untrustworthy, he's actually a very competent and trustworthy guy, but whenever he tried to discipline her in love, she was she wasn't receptive to it. She pushed him away. Why? Because of this limiting belief. So think about it. How do I find out my childhood loss? How do I find out my limiting? Well, start to think about scenarios, times when you feel like you have an overreaction, when you feel like you are particularly triggered. Once you found it, now this is the exercise that we're going to do. You're going to take one of these beliefs and you're going to try to find evidence to stack against it. You have a bunch of evidence. Remember, the things that you believe, your brain does what we just talked about, confirmation bias. And what is confirmation bias? It works positively and negatively. Our brains are wired to look for evidence supporting what we already believe. But here's the problem. As long as these beliefs remain unchanged, it shapes our perceptions about the world, how we react to certain situations in life, which in turn tends to bring what we believe to be true about us. So there are beliefs that you are believing that are simply not true, that they are lies. And if you do not challenge these beliefs and then change these beliefs, you are going to continuously stack up evidence to support a lie. That's why the Bible says the truth will set you free. The truth will set you free. What is making you stuck? Childhood laws, limiting beliefs. But now that you know that this is the thing that is getting you stuck, that is making you stuck, well, now what do? We identify it. And now I'm going to give you 2 examples about how you're going to put them into practice. I had a client who he didn't know what was his childhood law and his limiting belief. But when he showed up to work one morning, someone questioned him. Someone said, "Where did you go to school?" And he said, "Such and such place." And then the person says, "Well, what did you study? And what did your studies look like? And how long did you take?" Now, he started to get very triggered by the questions that his client was asking. And he started to get very defensive. And he started to say, "Well, why do you care so much? I already told you I went to school, and it took this amount of years." And he came to session, and he said, "I freaked out on this client of mine simply because he was asking me questions about where I went to school and how long did it take for me to graduate, etc., etc., etc." I said, "Well, why did you have such, an intense reaction to those questions?" And he says, "I have no idea. But I knew that there was something there because there is no way someone could react with so much intensity and anger and frustration about simple questions." And then he found it. And then we were able to dig and dig and dig, and we were able to discover it. This client of mine grew up with this belief. Without a PhD, you're never going to gain people's respect. My client, he had a master's and he was doing great work with his clients and he was respected and he was admired. But deep inside his soul, his being, he always had this thing in the back of his head. Could it be that my clients really aren't respecting me? Could it be that I really can't make a difference in their lives because I don't have a doctor in front of my name? That was his limiting belief. And this limiting belief had him react in a way that was quite ridiculous with a client that was just asking questions. And so what do? We had to challenge this belief because he was walking around believing that he wasn't good enough, that he wasn't equipped, that he wasn't talented, that he couldn't help his clients because he simply didn't have a doctor in front of his name. And that's not true. That's not true. And so how do we challenge this belief? First we discovered it, and now we have to challenge it. Now we have to overcome it. And so this is what we did. We started to figure out, well, what makes people trust us? And what makes people respect us? And what makes people admire us? It's not reputation. It's not IQ. It's not accolades. It's not a doctorate. You know what makes people respect you? You know what makes people trust you? It's character. And you know what makes people respect you? It's competence. How do we know? Well, there's a story in the Bible. Remember, the Bible says the truth will set you free. And this man was enslaved by what his mother and father said, of course, trying to motivate him. Go to school. We believe in your potential. Go be a doctor. But he didn't want to be a doctor. But he felt that if he didn't go and have doctor behind his name, that he wasn't going to be successful. And that's not true. There are many people who are not doctors and are very successful and are great at what they do and do great work with their clients. So now go with me to 1 King, and I'm going to show you a little story that I absolutely love. It's really quick. 1 King, chapter 18, and it says this. Oh man, this story is brilliant. And this is what I showed my client, and we broke this limiting belief, and no longer does he believe this. The truth set him free. He found it, right? He discovered. This is what we're doing right now. Are you feeling stuck? Well, this is how you get unstuck. He found his limiting belief, and then he overcame it. He overcame it how? By stacking up evidence that showed that that belief was not true. Why? The truth will set you free. And so this is what it says. Look, 1 King 18, and then we'll look at verse 19. It says this. This is Elijah, okay? Elijah's a prophet of God. It hasn't rained for 3.5 years because Elijah gave the command. Elijah said, listen, it's not going to rain for 3.5 years because you guys are going against God. You guys are stubborn. You're stiff-necked. You're worshiping other gods, lowercase g. So it's not going to rain for 3.5 years. Okay? Now, Elijah is about to demonstrate who is the true God. And that's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so he goes to the king, King Ahab, who is so angry and frustrated at Elijah because instead of taking responsibility for the fact that it's not raining, because he and his people and his kingdom were going against God, he blames it on Elijah, obviously, right? And so Elijah goes to the king and he says, therefore, send and gather all of Israel to me on Mount Carmel, the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. Look at this. Who is Elijah? Elijah is a prophet of God, but King Ahab, he is the king of Israel, okay? He is the guy in command. He is the guy in charge. And the Bible said, look, so Ahab sent for all the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together on Mount Carmel. My client believed that he could not have influence and that he could not inspire his clients because he didn't have doctor in front of his name, because he didn't have a title. Right here, this story, 2 verses, it shows us that to have influence over people, to have authority, to have people's respect, it's not about reputation. Reputation is who people think you are. Character is who you are. It's not about reputation. It's not about IQ. It's not about if you're a king or not a king. It's about character. Ahab, as soon as Elijah gave the command, Ahab obeys as though he's the servant and Elijah's the king. Do you see that? Quickly, without hesitation. The king doesn't even question Elijah. He says, who are you to tell me what to do? Have you lost your mind, Elijah? Do you not know who I am? I am the king, not you. You don't tell me what to do. I tell you what to do. But no. Here's the thing, because character breeds trust and competence breeds respect, and character, the character of Elijah did all the talking. So it didn't matter if Ahab was the king or not the king. As soon as Elijah opened his mouth, the king obeyed his command. Oh man, I love that story. And so, do you see here? Do you see what happened? And so my client, boom, he thought, that's it. I don't need a fancy doctor in front of my name to influence and to inspire my clients. He broke that childhood law. He broke the curse of that limiting belief. And now he believed in truth. And guess what? Because now he walked around like, hey, I can make a difference. And I can impact someone's life. And guess what? Confirmation bias. Now that he had held this new belief, he found evidence to support this new belief. Can I hear a hallelujah? Okay, last example, and then we're done. Welcome, those who are joining in. Please, if you're just coming into the end, we're about to end here. I have one last example for you, but if you missed the beginning, start from I'm going to leave it here recorded on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're watching, and you can just watch from the beginning. The question we're trying to answer is, are you feeling stuck? And if you are feeling stuck, this is the live to watch to get you unstuck. The reason you are stuck is because you have childhood laws and you have limiting beliefs that have been passed on by your parents. Again, we're not shaming your parents. It served maybe when you were younger, but it no longer serves you now. So you need to get rid of those limiting beliefs so that you can experience truth, so that you can feel free, and so that you are no longer paralyzed by these beliefs that are simply not true. Remember, although feelings are real, they're not necessarily truth. Right now, you may be operating in the triangle of death. What's the triangle of death? Fear, stress, and anxiety. But here, tonight, we're trying to move you towards the triangle of life. What's the triangle of life, Amanda? Triangle of life is quality relationships, health, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and a vocation, your calling, the thing that God created and made you to do. So now look, the last example, I was talking to Renee earlier about this, and Renee and I have been waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, okay? I know, it's insane. We woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I think at 9 o'clock, what did you say to me? At 9 o'clock, Renee's like, we've already been up for 5 hours, and you have no idea how productive you are. I mean, we read, we walked, we talked, we worked out, we did everything, okay? Those 5 hours, I mean, we did a lot. And so we've been just loving to wake up that early. The boys are still sleeping, obviously. It's dark outside, it's been chilly, and we've just been getting so much work done that it's been absolutely incredible. And so anyways, we woke up this morning and I started to ask Renee, I said, hey Renee, what are some of the childhood laws that you had? What are some of the limiting beliefs that you had? And Renee said something interesting. He goes, the childhood law that I had, and mind you, my parents are immigrants, his parents are immigrants who came from Brazil to America to provide the best for us. And so again, this is not about, oh, my mom, no. This is not about dishonoring or disrespecting our parents, but understanding that things that maybe made sense for them back then no longer make sense for us now, and we can change it. We can change it. And so he goes, I was sort of bred for an 8 to 5 job. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, one of the things that my parents instilled in me, which is it's a good law, okay, it's a good belief, is safety and stability. And so I knew from an early age that I just wanted to go to school, I wanted to go to college, and then I was going to find myself a job that, I was going to get whatever, what is it, what is it? Like when you get like your savings in your job, your 401k, right? So he's like, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to have 401k, I'm going to have insurance. He wanted safety and stability, and that's exactly what he did. Middle school, high school, college, and then was very comfortable in a job for the past 6 years. Was very comfortable in a job for the past 6 years. The problem is, Renee married me, and I am unconventional, and do not get comfortable in situations. And for me, it's not about safety and stability. For me, it's about passion. And so here we go, right? Our worlds collide. He was bred to be this blue-collar worker, and that's fine. But we started to challenge this belief. This belief was being challenged when he kind of saw, my profession and the things that I was doing. And he started saying, oh my goodness, Amanda is working way less days and way less hours than I am. And she's having safety and she's having stability. And the income is coming in, sometimes even more and better than mine. So these beliefs were being challenged. Right? And so Renee did something, and I was so proud of him for doing this. He wanted to challenge this belief. And so he has this little side hustle that he does, and it's because he loves doing it. But he likes to buy and flip ATVs, okay? So he's always buying and flipping ATVs. Sometimes we'll have like 5 ATVs, parked outside, and he's always buying, fixing, tweaking it, whatever. And so he was getting I know, 4 a.m., it's crazy. Yes, Pedro, we need to free ourselves from limiting beliefs. It's holding us back. We are stuck. There's no reason why we need to continue to believe these limiting beliefs. We can get ourselves unstuck, and this is how we're doing it, right? And so, look, and I was so proud of Renee. He challenged this belief. Hey, I'm an 8 to 5, blue-collar worker because of safety and stability. And then he starts seeing, but no, that doesn't make a lot of sense because Amanda's not working an 8 to 5. And I kind of want to start doing that. Sort of this entrepreneurship spirit started to arise in him, right? And it's tough to sort of go on your own and to be an entrepreneur and all these things because, well, there is no certainty, right? There is no certainty, but again, there are high rewards. And so he was buying this ATV. He didn't know if he wanted to buy this ATV. And I kid you not, Renee is such an overthinker, okay? He's a human Excel spreadsheet. He's an overthinker, completely different than me. I'm just go. He's on the brakes. And so we're having this conversation. He's like, oh, should I buy this ATV? Should I not? Should I buy this ATV? Should I not? And I said, Renee, make a choice, make a decision. And then I realized, look, Renee was having difficulty making a decision. You know why? Because he had a childhood law, a childhood belief that safety and stability and make sure you look at all your risks, which is a good thing. But sometimes you're going to have to make a decision. And so he says, I want to do it differently this time. And so he says, I'm going to put myself out of my comfort zone. And so he ended up, making this deal that was so completely out of his comfort zone. It was a very successful deal. Could it have been unsuccessful? Sure. It was a very successful deal, however, and he showed himself, he proved himself, hey, if there was something that worked back then, and I understand why my parents wanted to do this. They were immigrants. They wanted safety, stability. They wanted income. They barely spoke any English. But this is not the situation now. This is not my case now. And I'm happy to say that Renee is even transitioning out of this job for 6 years. I've been just on him and on him and on him. Renee, get out of this job. Renee, get out of this job. And this morning, it's kind of like boom, like the lights flipped on, and we realized why he had such a hard time removing himself from this job. And so we began to challenge this belief that he has, and now guess what? Confirmation bias is working positively. Well, Renee, what evidence do we have that is supporting that no, stability and security isn't just happening for people who have 8 to 5 jobs. There are a lot of people who are entrepreneurs. There are a lot of people who don't work 8 to 5 jobs, who have stability and who have security. Does that make sense? I hope this was helpful to you. And remember, I'm going to give you one final thought. Whenever we're talking about this, there are laws, childhood laws, that are principles, okay? Principles are not to be broken. We do not compromise on principle. We compromise on preferences. There are things that were passed on by your parents that are preference things. They're not principle things. If it's principles, you can't get rid of it. That's law. Those are immutable. Those are commandments. Those are precepts. We don't get rid of those. But if they're preferences, you have to change those things because it could be the reason why you are feeling stuck. And so anyways, tonight I hope you were able to find your childhood law, your limiting beliefs. If you were not able to find it, I hope you know now how to find it. Just look at the things that are being triggering to you. Number 2, I just explained to you how you're going to overcome. You're going to challenge it with evidence suggesting the other. Right? That's what Renee did. Renee said, well, I'm challenging this because this, and this, and I'm looking at Amanda. Challenge your limiting beliefs because the Bible says the truth will set you free. And move away from the triangle of death, stress, fear, and anxiety to the triangle of life. Quality relationships, health, and purpose, passion, your mission. Because to us here at this character development, we believe that success is dominating your emotions, dominating the triangle of life, or the triangle of death, and then balancing your life in the triangle of life. Balancing it so that all of these, you have quality relationships, health, and vocation, passion. Anyways, I hope this was helpful to you. I hope so. If you're just coming in now, we are coming to the end of our live. Renee and I obviously have to sleep. We were up at 4 a.m., okay? We were up at 4 a.m., and we're doing it again tomorrow. So I'm going to literally, say goodbye to you guys. We are both ready for bed, and we are going to sleep. Yes, Pedro, we don't compromise on principle, but we need to change preferences to what fits our walks. Absolutely, right? We have different abilities, different talents, different personalities. We need to be flexible when it comes to preferences, but never flexible and never willing to compromise on principle. If you're joining us, I encourage you. I'm about to save this to our IGTV. Are you feeling stuck? This is how to get unstuck. I think this is a good one. I think it was very practical. There's a lot of examples. It was straight to the point. Take notes, write it down, apply it. Then I would love for you to let me know if it was helpful to you in any way. I encourage you to join us. We are here every Wednesday at 8 p.m. And if this was helpful to you, well, by all means, share it with your family and friends. All right, guys, we're sleeping. I'll see you next time.